Last year, we spoke to investigative reporter Ryan Kath and producer Shira Stoll of NBC 10 News Boston. They talked about their series of investigative reports about professional tenants Linda and Russell Callahan, who cheated numerous property owners in Massachusetts for over 20 years. The Callahans squatted in the properties of other people, refusing to pay rent after providing fake identities and phony documents. Attorney Jordana Greenman described how the system fails to hold these types of tenants accountable while even encouraging their bad behavior. Since that conversation, Ryan and Shira won the Edward R. Murrow Award for investigative reporting for their coverage of professional tenants. The Callahans, meanwhile, were indicted on over 50 criminal charges involving fraud, larceny, and forgery. And even as they attended multiple court hearings to answer those charges, they still continued their bad behavior right up until they landed in prison, where they truly belong. Today, Ryan and Jordana return to provide an update about the Callahans 1 year later and to discuss what the future might hold for them. Reporter Scott Van Voorhees will also provide his insight about media bias in presenting these stories, if these stories are even presented often enough. The conversation will also highlight other professional tenants who may be living under your own roof. Viewers beware. Hello, everyone. My name is Amir Shahsavari. I'm the Vice President of the Small Property Owners Association, also known as SPOA, which welcomes you to episode 19 of SPOA Housing Policy Series. This is where we discuss property rights and all things real estate. I'm happy to welcome back Mr. Ryan Kath, an investigative reporter with NBC 10 News Boston. Great to have you today, Ryan.
Thanks, Amir. Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. Attorney Jordana Greenman represents small property owners. She's been on the program before. Jordana, nice to have you back.
Nice to be had. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hi again. Scott Van Voorhees is the editor-in-chief of Contrarian Boston and a trailblazer in independent journalism. Thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, Samir, for having me on again.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to remind you kindly to donate to the Small Property Owners Association. You can do that at spoa.com/join. Once again, that's www.spoa.com/join. As you know, we work hard to defend your property rights, and it's not getting any easier given all the harmful proposals up on Beacon Hill, on top of other challenges that we have on a daily basis. So once again, please remember to donate at spoa.com/join. Ryan, I'll turn to you. Last time we had the pleasure of having you on, you joined us with your producer, your then producer, Shira Stoll, talking about Linda and Russell Callahan, professional tenants who had defrauded property owners in Massachusetts for 2 decades. And at that time, or since then, after we discussed their case, they kept doing what they were doing until they were charged. They were criminally charged with larceny, forgery, and fraud. And back and forth, over the course of different court hearings, they still targeted other property owners, including a person in Worcester, by providing a false identity and squatting inside that property. And it kept going on until they were finally arrested. So we're eager to hear from you if you could update us further on the details of that and what happened between our last talk about a year ago and where the Callahans are now.
I know a lot's happened in a year. I was looking back today to see when it was that we last connected, and it was almost a year ago to the day that we first discussed our professional tenants investigation about the Callahans. At the point we last spoke, we had kind of laid out this 20-year pattern of defrauding the small property owners in Massachusetts, well over $100,000 in unpaid rent and well over a dozen evictions all over Worcester County. And so the question at the time was, was anyone going to do anything about it? As we showed, it was, it was certainly criminal behavior, but it was looked at by folks in law enforcement or in DA's offices as housing court matters, right? And so finally, when we laid out the pattern, uh, the Worcester County DA did take action. They indicted the Callahans earlier this year on more than 50 criminal charges. They were arrested from that Worcester property that you mentioned, where they had used fake documents, fake credit report, fake pay stubs, and bounced the checks. But by the time the property owner realized it, they were already inside, moving in furniture and things like that, and then they just camped out until they were arrested. And at last check, they are still in jail, awaiting to see how that case is resolved. Amir, I don't know if you remember this or not, but one of the landlords that we interviewed for our initial investigation, the piece ended with him saying, I hope that they eventually end up in jail. And then he kind of quipped, free housing. That's what they're looking for, right? Free housing. So his sentiment there kind of came true. So we're going to see what happens with them. But again, they're facing some very serious charges and a long list of them.
Yeah, and that was pretty powerful when he said that, and I'm glad it finally turned out that way. But the scary thing is, why would it not surprise me if they found their way out of prison and then back again, victimizing someone else? Because even though they are celebrities, notorious celebrities in the courts, to the point where even the judges, they know who these people are, they frown upon them, but the system just lets them keep getting away with all the bad stuff they've been doing. I mean, that's the scary part. And, Jordana, you were with us providing legal analysis about a year ago when we talked about this, or I guess it was exactly a year ago, as Ryan was saying. How realistic is the probability of them getting out of prison and doing it again and getting away with it until they can be put back into prison? I mean, it's very frightening. I think that's what a lot of us want to know.
Is 101% a thing? Because that's how likely I think it is. I don't think that people such as these people know another way to be. I don't know that I feel that people learn their lesson now that our lovely state is housing them, right, in jail, wherever. It's there's time to figure out how to do it again, maybe in a little different of a way. Maybe we can use our middle name as our first name next time. Maybe we can take a letter off of our name, something like that. But what is scary is exactly what you said. There is no effort whatsoever in this state to control what has become complete and utter mayhem in the housing courts. Total mayhem. Even district court, if it were an option, might be a better option at this point. But you run the risk of having your case transferred to housing court. And in housing court, it's tenant is right. Nothing is an emergency unless a tenant is about to be evicted. And it doesn't matter what a landlord says, almost ever. It is so hard, especially with people who are good at what they do, such as the Callahans. They know how to maneuver. There are so many landlords out there still who have never seen or heard of SPOA or maybe even heard of housing court. So they don't even know, it could be a 2 or 3 family owner occupant or somebody out of state or out of the country has a small, oh, sure. Yeah, no, we want to get someone in there quick. Let's go. And people don't even think twice. They don't even realize that not everybody is a good person. And so they let them in and it happens again over and over and over.
Because left hand and right hand don't communicate, it's not really a critical thinking game. It sounds like the system is just set up very robotically to follow the same dangerous, unfair pattern that you described.
It
I,
is. If you came across these people again and you could somehow prove through photographic evidence or something else, you find out they move into your house and a month later something happens and you take them to court. The court will not even for 1 second consider first that they're criminals, second that they committed fraud, that they went to jail for it, and that they've done this 1,000 times. It's not even going to be able to come up. And at some point, they'll be able to try to expunge all of their housing court records.
I know Jordana lives in this world, but as someone who is coming in more as a novice from the outside, that's one thing that amazed me about this is how easy it is to repeatedly delay your eviction case by coming in with motions at the 11th hour where, maybe you've come down with an illness or, someone's in the hospital or you didn't get notice in time, so you deserve more time to react. Using bankruptcy multiple times, filing bankruptcy, even though you have no intention of actually following through and executing a bankruptcy, just filing the notice immediately pauses an eviction, claiming something is broken inside your apartment or your house that needs to be fixed by the landlord. I've just seen all these delay tactics, and to Jordana's point, the attorneys representing the property owners will say in court to the judge that these are professional tenants who have done this for years, and it doesn't seem to resonate or have any impact on whether or not the case is delayed or continues to move along right then and there.
Is that because even if the judge, from a human perspective, knows better, he or she is obligated to open the book wherever the statutes are written and automatically say, okay, well, because they're allowed to extend this thing with excuse A, excuse B, excuse C, I have to let them do that? Is that what it's come down to?
No, it's really sort of the way that the different laws are interpreted. So, for instance, if you are going to evict somebody and they don't show up on the first court date, then you come back the next day. The tenant, comes back the next day and says, I was in traffic, something. The judge has to follow a formula that is there a good excuse for you not being here? And if you had been here, do you have a feasible response to this money that you owe or this damage that you caused or the fact that this 95-year-old person needs to move back into their house? Most judges always defer to their equitable power and say, I think it's better to try the case on the merits. I think it's better for people not to just win by forfeiture. So we're going to give you another date. And then so take Boston, for instance, in 2 out of 3 of the courtrooms, you might get a date that same day, 2 to 3 weeks out. And the other one, you'll be told you'll get one in the mail. It's going to be longer than that because of that right hand, left hand thing. So the judges and what they say over here doesn't really trickle down to the clerk's office as an immediate thing. And that's how I think that due process for landlords and probably tenants too in certain circumstances, it's just completely thrown out the window. I can go with you to court and say, hey, Mr. Callahan, will you move on October 1st? And you can say, yes, I will. So we sign an agreement. We have it presented to the court. Somebody from the court presents it to the tenant. They sign it. Everybody's all good with it. The judge even signs off on it. And I go to get my execution on October 1st. And then on October 2nd, I say, why don't I have it yet? And October 7th, I say, my client's getting antsy. And the court says, you're rude. You really shouldn't be pushing us to get this stuff. We're working on it. We're backed up. The computers don't work, this or that. So it's a constant infringement of why did I sign a contract? And that's what a lot of landlords say about leases. Why did I sign this to begin with? If it's not going to be enforced, what was the point? And that's where it's just such a hard area. And Ryan is right. It's amazing. If you just go, I got in my email today a motion for more time on a case that a month ago we waived $72,000. $72,000. But didn't give her enough time? Really? That's insane to me. So, it's so hard, and the way that people are allowed to get away with whatever they want, and because when you are a landlord, you are required to be perfect, and I mean perfect. If you forget to dot the J in my name, your case might kick out, except for that, but it's just, if you don't have a rent ledger, even if you don't know what a rent ledger is, and you're just collecting rent from somebody who lives downstairs from you, if you say, Your Honor, this person told me that they had no evictions, but they did. It doesn't matter. They're already there. And that gives them rights. That sort of possession is the 9/10 of the law. It is real. It is so real. And it is so sad because so many people cannot, especially small property owners, afford it financially. How about mentally? This could, I can't even imagine the last people, I guess, who finally actually did something about these people were smart. But how many families did they destroy before that? How many people almost lost their homes because of them? Michelle Wu doesn't talk about that when she talks about rent control.
So
And the
I had a
governor,
question, Jordana. How many of these it sounds like you had to move heaven and earth to get any action against the Callahans. How many other kind of scammers are out there? I mean, is this like, are we talking about a few dozen, or no, maybe not to that level, but just making this a lifestyle?
I've
a
wondered that
lot.
or sorry, I kind of jumped in there, but
Yeah,
Scott, I've actually wondered that exact question, to get a sense of how broad this issue is, how many
sure.
people are affected. I did try to make a request to the housing court, to see if they could produce numbers that would run people's names and then try to get a sense of like how many people have three, four, five at fault evictions on their record.
Right.
And the housing court said that they don't compile large data requests like that. And they also said something that I can kind of see is that court record isn't a unique identifier like a social security number or something like that. And what you run into, like we've seen with the Callahans and some other folks as well, is that they use variations of their name, the spelling.
Sure.
So we couldn't just search the Callahans and get a full scope of their evictions because they have different spellings. And we've seen that with other professional tenants as well. So I only know anecdotally, and I've had a number of people reach out to me since we first published this story a year ago to tell me about professional tenants they've dealt with. But usually what I hear about is the tip of the iceberg. Unfortunately, there's no way to really pinpoint how many are out there.
Yeah, I mean, it
It's
sounds like
it's
there
a
could be a
lot.
lot more. Yeah, I mean that are, and it's such an archaic system. I mean, they're really not to be able to like do basic research and statistics, or it seems like they don't really want to. They just want to keep doing things the housing court the way they've been doing it. Don't really want to, you know, aren't really interested in sort of helping people or helping anybody catch the bad guys there.
In answer to the question, there's a lot of variations of the way that you can be scammed. But being a professional tenant doesn't necessarily mean you're the Callahan. It could be a different type of thing. I had a case um, last year. It took, I don't know, a year and a half because the guy was just very good. I mean, he probably didn't go to school. I don't know, but he would just go in the housing court every single day and file something else. And then he would file and file and file, and he would copy everybody and their mother on everything he filed. And so we had to keep going back and going back. And I said to the chief magistrate, well, why? When I file a motion, sometimes you don't even accept it for days on the e-filing. But this guy can just walk in and I get court dates every time. He said, oh, well, you should file a gatekeeper motion. You should spend your client's money trying to stop him. But I don't have clients that have that kind of financial status to be able to pay me to spend
Sure.
all day on everything.
What about the Coombs? Am I pronouncing that correctly, Ryan?
Yes, you are pronouncing it correctly, and they're another example where I found different variations of that last name. I had Coombs spelled Coombs, and then also spelled with a BES at the end. So I was able to find a variety of different eviction cases involving them. In terms of scope, they were very similar to the Callahans, where they've been doing this roughly for 2 decades. The main difference between them and the Callahans is they seem to understand the line you can't cross from a criminal standpoint. And what I mean by that is I did not find evidence of them bouncing checks to get into the property. They would usually write the first month's check and have that go through to establish tenancy. In Massachusetts, writing a check that you know is going to bounce or is from a closed account is a felony. They also, from what I could tell, did not use fake documents to get in. What really interested me about the Coombs, and the reason I decided to pursue that story as well, because what you run into here is people contact you about professional tenants, but how many different professional tenant stories you can do when it starts to get redundant. What we wanted to look into with the Coombs is we discovered they were receiving taxpayer rental assistance. And the question was, well, how do they qualify for something like that, given the track record where they have multiple at-fault evictions on their record? Why then is the state stepping in and approving them and saying, yes, we'll pay your first month, last month, and then maybe for the first year, we'll pay half of your monthly rent? That was the really question we wanted to dig into there. And we don't have a good answer to that because, as you all probably know, taxpayer rental assistance is a very private, confidential thing. The state won't even acknowledge that the Coombs received taxpayer rental assistance. And so we still haven't received a good answer as to why that is. It's going to take someone from higher up to look into that. But to the point you were making before, we never heard from the Callahans. They've never stopped to talk to us in the multiple times we've seen them at court or other venues. But Brian Coombs, we went to one of his housing court hearings where he had successfully delayed his case yet again. He's had an eviction case now going on for more than a year in Woburn, where he's living. And we stopped to talk to him outside of court, and without hesitation, his first answer was, "I use the law, and the law helps me do what I need to do." He summarized the whole story in his initial answer there. And to your point, he's shown how you can navigate the law and without breaking the law, do things that allow him to stay in the property as long as possible.
I was amazed by that, and he kept using the same canned excuses in front of you, saying, "Oh, well, I'm here because the owner didn't repair this or that," which was highly likely a fabrication on his part. The same excuses, "Oh, there's a tiny hole in the wall. I'm not paying my rent." And in a lot of these situations, the tenant most likely created that tiny hole in the wall, as if that tiny hole, and Jordana has said this herself, there's no such thing as a defective wall. No proper, and even if there is, no property is perfect, but why would a tiny hole in a wall be
Sure.
used to say that the apartment is not livable? But again, he did his thing. He played his cards, and you had him running away at the very end. He didn't want to answer your questions anymore. But the real groundbreaking part of that, and you just mentioned it, Ryan, was the whole taxpayer implication that the average taxpayers are paying for the criminal deeds of these people. I mean, Scott, I mean, isn't that huge? Shouldn't mainstream media be covering that?
Oh yeah, no, I agree. That's huge. That's a great story. And I also wonder from the state government side, I mean, if you're applying for housing assistance, aren't they asking for like social security numbers? Now, maybe they're just making that up, but there's got to be, you've got to think, unlike in, as you're saying, Ryan in court, where they just come up with, just come up with a different name or remove an E from the end, that at least with state government, you must require some sort of identification that would to get rental assistance, right? I mean, you can't, and they could use that to figure out what they're, I mean, that only gives them a narrow window of what these guys are up to,
Right,
you
and
know?
you have to wonder, we're not able obviously to see the applications they file because that's part of the confidential nature of that process, but
Sure.
it does beg the question about are they accurately listing whatever income they make through jobs to qualify for that? Are they accurately listing people that live in the household? Obviously, a lot of things we'd love to take a closer look at. We just don't have access to those documents.
Right. And they're not going to tell you because they don't want to talk about individual cases and they might talk about an aggregate, right? But they're not going to,
Correct. Correct.
even though it's, for a lot of people, most people are be pretty frustrated at the idea that they're paying for, con artists to get a break on their rent. I mean, or get the rent paid, right?
Mhm.
Um, you would think that they have the state or I don't know if it's the Department of Housing uh, transition or which department it is, but have they come back to say at all? whether they have any screening, you know, systems to prevent people that are, just trying to take advantage of the system?
We've received very generic answers, and they pointed us to the website and what qualifies you. And according to what should qualify the Coombs, doesn't add up, because you should only be facing homelessness as a result of a no fault eviction, not an at fault eviction. And obviously, they have many at fault evictions on their record, and that would be the only reason they were being evicted. So it seems like they should have qualified, but we just don't know what type of screening took place or who was doing that vetting.
Yeah, I mean, is this something where they could just look at the housing court records, that if they were doing a quick search and see their name pop up? And I mean, there's nothing to stop, the program officials from doing that, right? I mean, to do a little due diligence on that, right?
One would think, yeah, there's nothing stopping them. It's a simple search, as we all know, on masscourts.org.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
Ryan, you made a point earlier when you talked about the redundancy and trying to avoid talking about the redundancy of these cases from a media perspective. But Jordana, I'm sure you don't want to hear that, and the average property owners don't want to hear that because we don't hear these stories enough, do we? I mean, if they were to become redundant, that's a good thing because people have to understand the higher frequency at which these types of events occur. It's not just an isolated thing here or there. There are plenty of stories like this to go around. And I mean, this question is open to all of you, but Jordana, I'll have you go first. When it comes to the redundancy issue, isn't it? I mean, wouldn't you agree that the more these stories become public, the better? I mean, shouldn't we be? It's not a dig at the media or NBC 10. I know where Ryan is coming from, but wouldn't it be great for there to be some kind of an outlet to just air these stories more often so that the public understands how pervasive this really is?
We need more reporters like Ryan and Scott in order for that to happen. Yes, is my answer. But I mean, you don't know how many people have turned me down. I think Samantha Coomer was great. You had Wildia Capri on your show a couple of months ago. We were back in court yesterday. Her tenant was a very different type of professional tenant. I mean, so professional that she knows that because she's poor, she never has to repay any debt anyway. But it's it's yes, I wish, but I mean, even the Mass Bar Association won't let me publish anything that seems too opinionated. And we all know, for those who know me, that I'm pretty opinionated. And I know Scott is a great resource. I don't know what the audience is, though. How many people know about him? I know about him, but I didn't know about him until one of my landlords told me about him. So I mean, having more people that actually care enough to look at this, like Ryan doesn't say, I'm a regular person and I'm a news person, and this is wrong. I think this is wrong. This shouldn't happen this way.
Right, right. Now, Ryan, when you have to leave, just raise your hand and we'll do a send off.
I probably have a few minutes. I guess I'll close with this sentiment based on your question. For one, we did see a lot of interest in the stories that we've done, both on the Callahans and the Coombs. Those stories have performed very well on our site. They've generated a lot of comments, both on our site and on social media. As a reporter, I am always looking to advance the story and finding new angles. So it's not that we're not going to do professional tenant stories. It's what new types of incidents or failures in government oversight can we uncover to help advancing the story? Or are there proposals that make sense on Beacon Hill that would make this type of thing tougher to pull off? That's one of the things I've been trying to pinpoint. I've been in touch with Mass Landlords Association to see what ideas are out there. I'd welcome any ideas that you all have. But I think those are the questions that need to be maybe proposed to try to advance this type of story. Because I'll compare it to another series we've done. It's called To Catch a Contractor. We launched that 4 years ago, and essentially highlight contractors that have scammed homeowners and stolen money. And we've advanced that along the way by showing lax government oversight in the way contractors are registered and things with state law that can be changed to strengthen the system. In a similar vein, we would be looking at our reporting to move the ball along accordingly. So we don't want to just keep saying, here's another here's another professional tenant, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one. To your point, I know that would be good to show the breadth of the problem, but we want to also be able to just advance the issue and show maybe what could be done to correct it.
Thank you very much, Ryan Kath. It was
Thank
great to
you.
have you, and we look forward to having you back on in the future. Thank you again.
I appreciate you having me, and when we have our next segment, you'll be the first to know.
That sounds wonderful. Thanks for all that you do.
Thanks, everyone.
So, Jordana, turning back to you, we talked about a couple of examples, a couple of different cases. Are there any other ones that pop up that you want to talk about?
I mean, in terms of me and professional tenants, I think that there's another issue that's always going to be an elephant in the room for fear of, any landlord breathes anything and they are accused of discrimination, but there's a lot of abuse of the Section 8 system. That's another thing where you see professional tenants and
How's that abused? What do people do with it?
well, here's the thing. When you have a Section 8 mobile voucher, so there's two types of,
Yeah.
you can live in public
Sure.
housing, or you can have a mobile voucher where you can move from place to place. With the mobile vouchers and the public housing, guess who determines how much rent you as the tenant get to pay? The government does. So why?
Sure.
Why aren't you paying them? What happened? Because if the government decided what 30% of your income is, they've already left enough money for you to pay for groceries, for you to buy clothes for your kids, for you to do this, that, the other thing. The cigarettes, the whatever else isn't supposed to be paid for before you pay for your rent. And the getting to court and saying in these Section 8 cases that I have where there's a big amount owed, and they say, I'll just apply for raft. But wait a second, you're already getting government funding. What about the people who really need it, who are trying? Because they exist, they really do. There are people who run into trouble. Anybody can lose their job. Rich people can lose their job. Poor people can lose their job. I'm all for the theory behind the raft program if it weren't so abused. There are people, I have several clients right now in the Central Housing Court, for example, that covers Worcester County. They do not allow any non-payment agreement that lasts a day after you reach a zero balance. So generally, as landlord attorneys, we want an agreement to last for 6 months at least after reaching a zero balance. Central Housing Court says, no, you can't do that. You have to start over. So I have all these cases where I've had to bring them to court. Eventually they catch up. Then we start again. Then they don't pay again. Then they apply for raft again. And it's like there are people who are actually living off of raft rather than figuring out how to do something.
Yeah, and raft goes back. I mean, wasn't that like 2020 or the pandemic when they
raft is way older than that.
It's older
raft
than
has
that.
been around for as long as I've been around. It just wasn't.
Okay, so that's another.
I think it was $4,000 before COVID that people could get, and it stands for rental assistance for families in transition. Not rental assistance for a person living in a room that's paying $500 a month. It's people, and the fact that it got bad during COVID because we started being required to give you information as to how to use it. And it doesn't say, but you really should be sincere, and you really should look at your banking, and you really should look at your finances, or talk to a free counselor before you go applying for this. Just say, you're in trouble, apply. Go apply. And then there's raft accusing people of fraud, because the raft program, you have to go through this government thing called ID Me, where it's hard. I've tried to do it, you have to sit there and take a picture of yourself, and it gets your eyes, and if it doesn't match your license, they accuse you of fraud. But it's just, people are not, at the end of the day, I feel like there's just this serious concept of, I am providing housing for you. At what point do you realize that that's actually something that I'm doing for you? And the same judge that says that big gouges in the wall are reasonable wear and tear will tell you that if there's a gouge in the wall, you don't have to pay rent. So it's
Yeah,
like, if you sit in housing court and you see what happens, you start to
sure.
realize, wow, Jordana was right. Exactly what she said. Because a lot of people don't know how bad it is. They really don't get it. That it's a never ending cycle, and around we go. How did this person that I waived $71,000 for end up there? She ended up there
Sure.
because she failed to recertify her Section 8 voucher in 2022 and then decided that she just also wouldn't pay anything at all. And so the landlord's trying to figure out what's going on, but the tenant has lost her voucher. So it's not about inspections. It's about an administrative issue that the tenant caused because that one
Sure.
thing that she had to do every year by recertifying her voucher wasn't done. We get to court and she says, no one told me to do it. Again, really?
Right.
I would love these things. I think that it's great. The theory behind all of these programs is great. The fact that they
Sure.
exist for people who deserve them and use them properly is great. I have a good friend who was on Section 8 in her 20s, worked her way up, now owns her own house.
Sure.
That's the point. They're supposed to be a stepping stool. And that's the abuse that I see. Children who feel that they are entitled to inherit the Section 8 vouchers of their parents.
Really?
That's
Wow.
hard.
Yeah.
It's a tough
That's
pill to
it.
swallow.
But they don't, does the government allow that them or they just,
Yes, if you apply
oh,
properly.
wow. Well, the other thing I wanted to point out, and Amir, you had mentioned earlier, like who's paying attention, who's reading, and like I think different media organizations take up different spaces. Like, Ryan is, he's got the pressure of, I've got to get something that's going to be kind of unique, right? Or the next unique thing. And I have a much more targeted audience. It's business people, it's real estate people. We get a lot of views on our stories, and I got a mailing list of 15,000. It's growing. So and a lot of media people like Ryan read our stuff or cite it to get stories. So, but it's a good venue for digging into some of these things at a level that, the Globe isn't going to be interested in, or the Herald, and also the Globe and the Herald, where the Herald is different, but Globe also has maybe a bias towards like the sob story about the tenants or whatever, and skeptical that
Amen.
that the landlords are always up to no good, and so it's just that they're going to sort that out anyway, right? Boston Business Journal is sort of much more kind of like, well, if you're buying properties, it's kind of it's like more of kind of like that's a story. They're not going to get into some of this stuff, so we're a good venue for that, and people read us. I mean, it definitely and often if we have something, it'll force other people to feel like, oh well, that's a story. Maybe we should be covering that, you know?
Well, Scott, you do a wonderful job with Contrarian Boston, and it
Oh, thank
is
you.
really a lot of people know it, and I'm glad that you're growing. And it truly is a source for balanced perspective that you just don't get from other relative to other publications that
Sure.
are either too technical or too biased. And it's really unfortunate that the city's newspaper of record has gone down that extreme path where it's all based on pleasing certain factions who subscribe to a certain political
Sure.
ideology. It's not healthy. It's not actual reporting. It's not in the best interests of the community as a whole to perpetuate us versus them, in different ways. And I think
Sure.
they are guilty of that. It's not objective. But Jordana, you brought up an interesting point earlier when you said that Mayor Michelle Wu would never, ever acknowledge what you see, the injustices against the housing providers that you see happening every day. I mean, if she was in front of you right now, what would you say to her?
Please tell the world that you have a multifamily property that's vacant, except for that you live in one unit and you don't have a tenant. Why don't you have a tenant? Why don't you have a tenant, Miss Wu? I mean, I think she knows. I just think that the liberal mindset doesn't, again, unless you see what I see on a daily basis. And right now, I was in Chelsea on Monday, which is Boston Housing Court, Boston on Tuesday, Boston on Wednesday, Boston today. I'm going to Boston tomorrow. I've seen a lot this week. And probably in 10% of what I've seen are people who appear sincere to be doing everything they can to be the best them and make things work. It's the amount of entitlement. It's hard because, I come from very liberal parents. That's okay. It's one of the reasons that I represent small landlords and not big landlords, because I don't really care on a global scale. I more want there to be small housing providers. There's a big mixed use building going up next to my office, and it's just more ugliness, less lawn, fewer kids with bicycles. I'd rather people understand and appreciate that there's housing providers. And, it's just what you see is so bad. And if you don't go and see it, you don't realize that the housing court is more than closing your eyes and dreaming or having a nightmare about naked people in the snow without clothes in Boston in the winter. Because the reality is, I think that I don't know for a fact, and I'm not a statistics person, but I think that at least a lot of the homeless population in this state have either drug addictions or mental health issues, weren't even necessarily evicted. So the amount, I can tell you that from what I know, in 19 years, 3 of my cases have actually resulted in homelessness. And I know that because I've seen the people. And everybody else has ended up somewhere. And that's a lot. That's a lot of years. It's not a bad record. Sure. And it's, instead of helping yourself, making it work, I had a case today where there was so much money owed and legal services got involved. And they said, well, this assistance, that assistance. And I said, but do you realize that because of Trump, the amount of government assistance that actually exists has gone down? And at some point, something's got to give. This person is supposed to pay less than $500 a month. But you're telling me she's going to apply for more assistance, where she's already has a mobile voucher. She already gets food stamps. She already gets utility assistance. What else is the state going to give?
Right. So you have people just running into, maybe messing up their finances and then trying to get more assistance, right? I mean,
yes.
Or going to court or going, battling with their landlord or, it sounds like a mess. That's for sure.
Speaking of messes, what about the name Dan Howitt? You have familiarity with this case, Jordana?
Yes. I was there was a small landlord who wanted to use my services. I communicated and I had a consultation with her on several occasions. Unfortunately, because of him, really couldn't pay me, so I couldn't take the case. As much as I love helping people, I do have a family, and she really struggled because, and anybody can look this up on public record, even she won, he appealed again. He has, sued the housing court. He's sued the appeals court. He's suing the judges. He's one of these people that just keeps on giving. He is the gift that keeps on giving. And there's always just like a teeny bit of a semblance of logic, or he's not a stupid person. Yeah. He's actually probably very smart. Maybe, on the spectrum. I don't know. But
yeah,
it's kind of insane that this is what you see. This woman had a condo that she lived in. He, I believe, has a voucher. And even though the condo was only one condo, it had several bedrooms, and somehow, I don't know if it was because of during COVID or what, that Section 8 was approving certain portions of apartments for rent rather than giving an entire apartment for rent. But he was living there, so she has to see him every day. He is complaining on a daily basis that she's violating his quiet enjoyment, but they live together. And if you look up his name in mass courts, even since just 2020, I think I found 18 cases. 18 cases he's had. And only in 3 or 4 of them is he the defendant. So again, these are all people he sues for who knows what, violating his rights. He doesn't pay.
So she's kind of stuck having to keep him in her house, I guess, or yeah.
I believe so. I don't know exactly. I mean, I haven't talked to her for a few months, but he did file for an appeal. And you know, even sometimes lawyers even sometimes take these people's cases. I don't know why our ethical code doesn't prevent that.
Because legal assistance or
what these people are doing is really bad. I don't know. I guess I don't know how people could represent a murderer. I guess everybody has a story, right?
Sure.
But in this particular case, they had a trial. It kept getting rescheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled. I can't even tell if they actually bench trial September of 2024. Then he's filing a motion to recuse attorneys. He looks to recuse judges.
So this is someone who behaves nefariously. He doesn't pay. Lord knows what else he's done. But then he comes back and he sues the people that he's victimized in addition to the judges and the lawyers?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, it takes money to file those lawsuits, doesn't it?
No, not if you're indigent, it doesn't.
So,
and the designation of indigent is if you have any form of public assistance. So if you had a hard winter and you got fuel assistance, that's government assistance. That means that you are indigent, and now you can file cases for free.
Wow.
I don't know what can be proven versus what can't be, but how easy do you think it would be for someone like this to qualify that way without actually falling into that category?
Because they don't look further. It's one of those things, again, that just doesn't matter. You fill out a paperwork at the court and they say, boom. I heard of a landlord who, he ended up moving on from me, and he even said to me, pulled me aside and said, you know, this guy was cheaper. I'm sorry. I don't care. But he tried to do it on his own, and he tried to file an affidavit of indigency, and the court denied it. He hasn't been paid. That's another professional tenant. His name is William Chen. Wait. Oh gosh, I think that's his name. Anyway, I've evicted him from 2 other places. So there's professionals that get away with it forever, like the Callahans, and then there's professionals who get away with it for a little bit, and then they move on, William Ching. He is another one that he gets evicted from one place, and while the eviction is pending, he ends up finding some other not bright landlord to take him in.
Yeah.
Because he's a nice guy, and he doesn't present totally terrible. He doesn't dress terrible. He looks like a regular person. So he just goes from place to place to place.
You had a case where somebody, like, they just couldn't, this woman rented out her house and somebody moved in and she rented it out to him. And then when she wanted to come back to live in it, I'm thinking of something else that she couldn't get back in.
Yeah.
Is that pardon? Yeah.
Canton. And she lost the trial because the judge believed their story. Which even, it's interesting because even the Haitian Creole interpreter didn't believe their story, but the judge did. So then she sold it, and I represented the buyer. They bought the property in July of 2024. We won that trial. They've appealed.
So are they still there? It's somebody
Yep.
with the new owner who's trying to figure out how to deal with them, or
Pay his own bills.
yeah.
He bought it to move in. It was a first-time home purchase.
Oh, but he hasn't. He's not been able to do that then, I guess.
He hasn't moved in. So not only that, but I think we totaled up his and I know he wouldn't mind me talking about it. I think we totaled up his expenses to cover the property in full every month. It's about $3,800.
Oh
He's
wow.
paying rent somewhere else, $3,200, and the occupants are paying $2,200 based on a lease from 2019.
Wow. That's crazy. And they probably had like temporary protected status, but maybe they don't now,
No, they're
or
just prepared. They're just
well, they're dead. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're deadbeats, or they just won't go anywhere, right? I mean, they just will refuse to move, right?
yes.
Yeah. Is that so? Do you have other cases where people like rent out their house or think they're gonna, and then just get stuck with somebody who just won't move or won't go away, or um,
Yes. Lots of them.
yeah, because I mean, that's everybody's worst nightmare, right? You're going away, maybe you're on business, or you're having to relocate for a few months, rent out your house, and then have somebody say, "Oh no, we're here." I know it's happened with Airbnb apartments, maybe, or maybe they have a system for dealing with it, but thought
Scott,
anyway.
didn't you cover a case somewhat similar where a tenant committed identity fraud and the owner couldn't get the tenant out?
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah, that might have been Woburn or
Yeah. Because
um,
the prelude
Lynn.
to the discussion for our next episode, Jordana next month is going to come on with a client of hers who suffered through a 4-year battle to remove a
Oh wow.
tenant who gave a false identity, which is illegal. I mean, on a lease, even though on any generic lease it says that if the tenant falsifies his or her
Right.
identity or provides false information, that's grounds for removal from the property. But how it really works is a very different story. Do you want to give us a brief intro for that one? A prelude,
For
Jordana?
Tasso,
Hmm.
so 2013, a Greek family owns a property and it's in a trust because both of the parents are getting to be older or sick or whatever. So he's the trustee of a trust, but they all own it together up in Lynn. And a tenant applies through a real estate agent and puts a specific name on her application. She had a reference that was called, but the social security number that she put down was not run by the agent, nor was the date of birth or anything like that. So fast forward to, I think, 2021, after both of his parents were gone and he just wants to have this house back. He has his dental office on the first floor, and it's much like my dental office. It's sort of the old fashioned kind. They don't have like Netflix on the ceiling or anything
Sure.
like that. It's just an old dental office. You walk in, it smells like
Yeah.
dental stuff. Um, it's sort of warm and fuzzy, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody loves their dentist. And she says, no, I'm not leaving. She gets legal services involved. I was not the lawyer. His first case got thrown out because the way that his name was filed was wrong. So then he starts again with another lawyer. It takes about a year. They lose based on technicalities that a lot of small landlords make issues. And then that right after he lost, he starts paying a little bit more attention. And somebody comes by, I think it was somebody installing one of those things to watch TV, what's it called? A dish.
Yeah,
And so
sure.
he goes up to the person and says, what is going on? I never gave permission for Miss Johnson to put a dish. And he says, I'm here for Celeste Cohen. And the the landlord says, who? I don't have a tenant by that name.
Yeah.
Automatically suspicious. Then realizes a bunch of packages have been delivered recently from Amazon and whatnot, and just looks at them when they're on the porch. They say, boom, boom. That's the person who they're being delivered to. Boom, boom.
Oh my God.
So then he sees a, I don't know if it was a lock on a meter or one of those flyers that the National Grid or NSTAR puts on your door if you haven't paid your bill. And he notices it's coming in the name of the person that applied, and it's an $18,000 debt. And he starts putting the pieces together, and that's when he contacted me. And I filed a motion to vacate the judgment based upon new evidence that this was fraud. Because actually, she's not who she said she was. She never was. And all
Sure.
these years, oh, another thing that happened, he paid her. He had to pay her as part of losing the first case. She did not cash the check. She signed them back over to him.
Hmm.
So all of these things combined are like, wait, what? So we go back in, and I might not have said this, but that eviction was a no-fault eviction. He just wanted his property back. And I say this was fraud on the court. And the judge says, you're right, but that's not what the eviction was for. Start again. Oh,
Wow.
okay, so fraud in Massachusetts is cool. Awesome. So I do. We eventually win that case. She starts pushing for more time, won't get it. I got the legal services people excluded, or I got them to move away from the case because it is a violation of ethical rules. The fact that they presented this person, put her on the stand, and had her tell them that her name was Lois Johnson when it wasn't.
Sure. Right.
So she no longer had a lawyer, but she keeps pushing and pushing and pushing. Her eviction finally was completed on September 2nd. At which point she was still sending nasty text messages with little emojis. His name, if you take it apart, has an ASS in it and an O. So she
Yeah.
would put like ASO.
Uh,
And she's
the
still
guy?
sending me this outrageous stuff about how he's a womanizer and this and that. Like they've never even hugged.
Yeah. That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
She sounds like a treat to deal with to try to get her out. Yeah.
and this is the
And
same woman that the first time I talked to her, she said, you're gonna have to evict me, girly.
man,
There
just
will be more to talk about when we get together, and Scott, you're invited to that
oh,
conversation
great.
too next month. Jordana will talk about this specific case in more detail with Tasso here. We're looking forward to that. I just want to rewind a little bit to my earlier comment about the Boston Globe. And just to be clear, I have given interviews with good reporters for
Sure.
the Globe who treated me fairly. They treated me well. It was very positive.
Oh, of course.
When it comes to the general trend, because these articles that these reporters write, they have to go through, and you know it, Scott, you can correct
Right.
me if I'm wrong, they have to go through an editor higher above and then another editor higher
Yeah.
above. And then the higher up you go, that's when the political spinners come in to either overemphasize one point or completely eliminate another point that's
Sure.
crucial to serve their political purposes, their biases. So I'm talking about it in the bigger picture, and I'm
Yeah.
hoping we can get to a point where mainstream media can become genuinely fair and balanced and to go down the road that you're going down, Scott, with
Sure.
Contrary Boston. So I congratulate you again,
No, thank you.
Jordana. You're welcome, Jordana. I congratulate you for all the work that you've done. I wish that there were more people like you. And also, I would say the same thing to Ryan Kath if he was here. But I thank all of you for this wonderful conversation. We'll be back again with a new episode in another month. Until then, I wish all of you well. Thank you very much.
Scott, it's great to see
Thank
you. Amir,
you.
great to see you.
And
Thank you,
nice to see you,
everybody.
Jordana. And thank you, Amir.
Let me also congratulate Ryan Kath and Shira Stoll for winning the Edward R. Murrow Award for Investigative Journalism for their focus on professional tenants. Ryan, keep up the great work. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember to tune in next time. Thank you again.